Well, we're finishing up the last weekend of the month of July. So now we're going to start looking toward August, although we still have a few days left in July. We've got some rain and even some bands of heavy rain coming in from the southeast on the radar. We'll be taking a look at this little pesky offshore weather system that did the unusual. And there's also some rain and some flash flood potential in parts of the southeast. We'll just be discussing that, the building heat in the central plains, little system in the tropics too that we'll monitor as we do quite well here. Sunday through Thursdays at 7:35 p.m. The Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast, brought to you by Tempest by Weatherflow. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system. Join the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet. The link is on the descriptor to this podcast. Use that coupon code.
Summer 2024.
Because if you use it, you'll get
10% off.
Yes.
Yes.
So the weekend is winding down, and you were able to avoid any complications during the day side today, other than some clouds rolling in for you. Meanwhile, another day here where temperatures had a tough time getting out of the 70s, and I've got some rain here in North Georgia. It's been raining every day. I think we've had rain every day for the past 7 days, and some more coming for tonight. But I'm looking at the radar, and Joe, there's some patches of heavy rain moving toward over Nantucket and Hyannis and parts of southeastern Massachusetts, and the band is kind of pivoting to the west.
Well, it doesn't happen very often at this time of the year. Yeah, it does happen from time to time, but at this particular time of the year, the end of July, to see a retrograding low pressure system, not a tropical system, mind you, not a one that will evolve into a tropical cyclone, but a good old-fashioned low-pressure system out over the ocean, which literally is backing in from the east and is bringing significant rainfall across portions of New England, eastern New England, and but likely will spread rain and shower activity into as far west as Long Island and the New York City metropolitan area during the next 12 to 24 hours.
Sometimes these little ocean storms, you get into a band of some heavy rain, and you wind up with a surprise. So it wouldn't shock me if most areas probably won't get this, but if one of these bands holds together, and I have the radar up on the screen, you can kind of see it there as it's pivoting westward. If somebody on Long Island gets underneath that, it could get a brief clobbering of heavy rain.
Yeah. Again, this is activity that is not, very widespread. We don't have a large swath of precipitation. It's still relatively concentrated, relatively small, but in those areas where the rain is falling, as you just pointed out, Joe, the rain in a few spots could be locally heavy. So something that we'll be keeping an eye on over the next day or so. But again, this is not, I repeat it, this is not a storm system that will develop into some kind of a tropical system. So we'll see.
Right. And it doesn't change where we're going. Inland areas might not see anything other than clouds out of this. And as far as the week ahead, we've got the higher humidity coming back. We have temperatures that'll be heading higher, but I don't think we're going to be going to any extremes. And it also does look like there'll be a peppering of shower and thunderstorm risk from time to time over the next 4 days.
Yeah, and it looks like of those days, I think the one day that stands out among all the others is going to be Wednesday afternoon and evening, when the probability for getting wet looks like will be greater than 50%, maybe 60, 70%. And then for Friday and into next weekend, whereas up until now, at least this weekend has been dry, and yesterday was quite nice. Next weekend, anything but. We may have to deal with showers and scattered thunderstorms, particularly during the afternoon and early evening hours for Friday, Saturday, and again on Sunday as well.
I mean, we're getting to that time of year. We talked about this last week. You start getting into August, and the character of thunderstorms changes a bit. You wind up usually you wind up emphasizing uh, well, heavy rain as opposed to gusty winds and tornado risk. Rain becomes the bigger issue, I think.
Yes, I would agree. The time for the potential for severe weather out of these things, the peak time comes from about late April or May into July, early July. Now we're seeing the characteristic of thunderstorms changing, tilting more toward just downpours as opposed to strong winds and possible tornado activity. Not all that nice, downpours, if they stick around long enough, can do a lot of damage in their own right, but a different type of thunderstorm threat as opposed to what we were seeing earlier in the season.
Welcome tonight to everybody on the chat board. Welcome to those of you who are lurking in the background to the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. We are here Sunday through Thursday at 7:35 p.m. and the occasional Friday and Saturday. If there's storminess around, we'll let you know ahead of time whether we are adding or subtracting shows. Subscribe to my YouTube channel so you don't miss us. Turn your notifications on. And of course, if you do like the show, you can show your appreciation by hitting the like button because we like them likes. All right, so let's get rolling here as we take a look across the country. There's not a whole lot in terms of adverse weather warnings and watches. We don't have any flood watches. A lot of what's going on in terms of heavy rain is producing some localized flooding here and there. You see some green patches in parts of north central Tennessee and also in northern Alabama. Looks like there's a flash flood warning up probably right in the middle. It's right not too far from Birmingham, I'm going to guess. And we've got the heat advisories and some excessive heat warnings going up for the Mississippi River Valley and parts of the Missouri River Valley, as well as back into Kansas and Oklahoma. Some red flag warnings up in the northern Rockies, where some high fire risk, I suppose, and we've got dense fog. But in the Northwest, the interior parts of the Northwest. But other than that, things seem to be pretty calm. And as we check out the satellite loop, you can kind of see that rotation there that's sitting off the coast of Long Island to the south and east of southern New Jersey. This is a non-tropical system, and you can tell from the signature here that's exactly what this is. And there was never really a threat, Joe, of this becoming a tropical storm, mainly because it just didn't have time. You had a wave that moved off the North Carolina coast, kind of shot out fairly quick on Saturday, shot out really quick to the northeast. And normally these things just kind of keep going on their merry way. But because of the upper air structure, where we've got this Bermuda high that's strengthening offshore, it sort of forced this thing to go turn north and then turn northwestward, which is what it's doing. And you can see that arm of bright white cloudiness coming in from off the ocean. The clouds have pushed into eastern Pennsylvania. The heavier cloud cover is to the east. And you'll get that rain. And everybody else, you look up in northern Maine, it's clear, and upstate New York, central and western Pennsylvania, down through Virginia, North Carolina, and even into parts of South Carolina. Uh, it's nice and clear this evening, and has made for the overall a fairly nice day in the east. And you can see the lightning strikes occurring in Alabama and parts of Georgia into Tennessee, and as far north as southern Illinois and up through eastern Missouri. And this is all, that system's pushing to the east. And at the same time, you've got the one to the east that's sort of pushing to the west. And just enough higher pressures in the middle to keep these things separate, which is what they're supposed to be.
Yep, and as I said, this looks like a week coming up where we're going to see an increase in both humidity, dew points, and also the threat of showers. As far as heat is concerned, again, not like what we had a couple of weeks ago where temperatures soar through the 90s to around 100, but it's going to get hot enough. I think temperatures later on in the week, especially, are going to be hovering close to or maybe even above 90. And side that with the higher dew point temperatures, it's going to feel rather uncomfortable. In fact, you get a 90-degree temperature with dew points in the low 70s, and it could feel like, 95, 97 degrees. So, unfortunately, this is the pattern that we're apparently looking at or staring straight in the eye for next week.
The west looks kind of nice. A lot of the southwest, you see some thunderstorms and lightning strikes in southern Arizona, as well as southern New Mexico, down into Mexico itself. Also, a few stronger cells going into northeastern Colorado and western Kansas and Nebraska, and also in parts of northern Wyoming, as well as in eastern Minnesota. Looks like a bit of a line of storms there. Here's what's going on in the southeast, where we've got some heavy rains and some downpours, and indeed a flash flood warning up for Birmingham in Alabama and surrounding areas. Some heavier thunderstorms there. Also looking at some heavier thunderstorms southwest of Atlanta. There's lighter stuff in the northern part of the state where I am. We'll see. Wonder if we're going to get into any of this. And then I see two flash flood warnings that are up. One northwest of Atlanta, up I-75, and the other one to the east of Atlanta, south of I-85. So we'll see whether that heavy rain progresses to me. We've got some heavy rain in eastern Tennessee at the moment. Some showers into Kentucky. We've got some heavier thunderstorms in southern Illinois. See a little flash flood warning going on there. Here's the area in eastern Minnesota, and there's some heavy thunderstorms popping up here. Looks like they're moving toward the Wisconsin state line, although I'm not seeing any severe weather warnings uh, being indicated. We do have a couple of severe thunderstorm warnings in eastern Wyoming and in western South Dakota, and a lot of flash flood warnings in southern Arizona. Well, one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, nine separate flash flood warnings up there. And of course, in Arizona, you can set off a flash flood warning with half an inch of rain because of the topography and how the ground gets baked like cement, and then all the water, coming down the rain coming down, all winds up running off. Storm Prediction Center tonight has a slight risk for severe weather in South Dakota, southwestern Minnesota, western Iowa, a good chunk of eastern and central Nebraska, and northwestern Kansas. The marginal risk extending back into Montana and Wyoming, and a little further east to the Wisconsin state line, and eastern Iowa and northern Missouri. And this comes with an area of 2% tornado risk, indicated for parts of South Dakota, eastern Nebraska, and western Iowa. And over the next couple of days, we've got severe weather risks in the Dakotas tomorrow and in north central Nebraska. Also, a marginal risk for isolated severe thunderstorms from central and southern Wisconsin, eastern Iowa, across Illinois and Indiana, going southeast into Kentucky. And that area in Illinois and Indiana and Kentucky, that comes with a 2% tornado risk. And for day 3, and this is for Tuesday into Wednesday, it's a marginal risk from North Dakota southeastward into the Ohio Valley as far south as Tennessee, and almost not quite to me. So there's that. And Joe, the flash flood folks from WPC on the flash flood map, they put a marginal risk for flash flooding in southeasternmost Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and southern Connecticut. Not to Long Island, though. But they did stick in a little area of marginal risk from that ocean storm. And then a bit more, a bit, what's the word I'm looking for here? I've suddenly, I'm having a senior moment, folks. Let's call it a larger area of risk, slight risk, southern Indiana southward through Alabama and northwest Georgia, marginal risk that goes down into parts of Florida, goes back up through Illinois, then you pick up to another area of slight risk in Minnesota, marginal risk in southeast and south Texas, along the coastal bend and areas inland, and a marginal risk in the eastern part of Arizona and much of southwest and south central New Mexico. That's for tonight. Tomorrow, it's a slight risk in the central Appalachians for flash flooding, marginal risk reaching up to southern Michigan and then going south through Georgia and into much of Florida at a marginal risk for flash flooding. Same goes for northern Wisconsin and the Upper Peninsula of Michigan and northeastern Minnesota, and a continued marginal risk in the southwest. And on day three, and this is for Tuesday into Wednesday morning, we have a slight risk again in the central Appalachians to western Pennsylvania, southwest New York, much of Ohio and eastern Michigan, extending south to the Georgia, Tennessee, North Carolina state line. No flash flooding being indicated through Wednesday morning along the East Coast, with the exception of Florida. And then once again, we see it in the Southwest. Now they've got a little area of an inch and a half plus uh, touching eastern Long Island, southeast Connecticut, and southern Rhode Island from this. I imagine that a chunk of that is probably from this coastal system. And otherwise, I mean, they're looking at maybe three-quarters of an inch to an inch and a half for the next 7 days, covering much of the eastern seaboard. Bigger rains in the Appalachians into eastern Kentucky and eastern Tennessee, back through the Great Lakes. And other than what's going on in the Southwest, which part of that is monsoonal, most of the West is pretty dry. But again, we're seeing this sort of more of a tropical feel to things in terms of what we're dealing with when it comes to these showers and storms.
Yep, and it doesn't seem like it's going to be ending anytime soon. We keep looking up to the north and west, well to the north and west, waiting and hoping to see a nice outbreak of Canadian air, which back in the day, Joe, at least once during July, after a protracted spell of heat and humidity, you usually got one of these breakout of cool, dry air from Canada. But I guess no more. I guess with climate change and global warming, we don't see that happen, at least in the month of July anymore. And now we're going into August, and we're hoping that in August we'll get a bit of a break from all of this humidity that we have been putting up with. It's been not so much a hot summer, but it certainly has been a very humid summer here in the northeastern part of the country.
That has been. I mean, I can remember. Even in some of the hotter summers we had. You're right. We always used to get. You used to get one good solid break at least where you had a day where temperatures didn't get out of the 70s. You had a day. The dew points were really low. Maybe a couple of days where the dew points were low. These dry shots in recent years during the month of July have been far more fleeting in nature.
Yes, and it used to be. You're absolutely right. If it wasn't, let's say, a backdoor cold front that came on down in the midst of a heat wave, and all of a sudden you had a day where it's like 90 degrees, 95 degrees, and then the next day, bang, it was cloudy, it was dreary, drizzly even, but you had those northeast winds and held the temperatures down in the 60s. I mean, we had breaks in heat waves that way. Or, as I mentioned just a few moments ago, after a siege of heat, you had one of these sharp cold fronts coming on down from Canada, which came in and literally broke the back of this spell or heat, siege of heat and humidity. We don't see that anymore.
No.
We simply just sit and it's like sitting inside of a steam cabinet. At least that's how it's been so far in the month of July. Except for if you can remember this far back, the opening days of July, the first couple of days leading up to the 4th of July, were really very, very lovely with low humidity and, very pleasant condition. But ever since then, it's been one day after another day after another day of humidity and the threat of showers and storms, broken every once in a while, like days like we had yesterday or last weekend. We had, I think, a Saturday where we didn't have to deal with it. But I mean, they've been few and far between. And I'm talking about a protracted, a spell of more than just a day, maybe like 3, 4 days of really nice weather. We used to actually get those in July. I don't remember it ever happening last year in July. Didn't happen this year. So all I can do is just hope, and all of you can hope that August we will get into a spell of more comfortable weather. And if you think about it, I mean the solstice was on what, June 20th, and August 20th will be 2 months past that, and things are changing up in the northern part of North America as with each passing day. With a little bit less sunlight, the cooler air begins to build, so to speak, and eventually it will build up enough so that it'll send forth a nice surge of dry, cool air. Ain't going to happen in the immediate future, but it eventually will happen, we hope, sometime in this upcoming month of August.
Yeah, well, it doesn't help the cause when you've had, the last couple of years in Canada in particular, where temperatures in the at least in the early part of the summer months have been running way above normal. So if your air is coming down from Canada and temperatures up there are way above normal, you might get the dew point relief, but you don't necessarily get the temperature relief.
Right, and being
I mean,
in
we got the dew point relief several times this month, but the temperature relief was minimal.
right, and I was thinking about days, and now I'm going way back. I've been watching the weather for a long time. I remember in 1979, there was a spell of unseasonably cool weather in August, where not only was it cooler, but I mean we had wind to go along with the cool weather, and it was absolutely refreshing. It was more like late September or October. I'd love to see something like that in August, but again, that those kind of conditions don't seem to happen anymore.
Yeah. Well, I brought up the upper air just to kind of show everybody what's going on here with this system that we've been talking about offshore, and there's a trapped upper low that's east of New Jersey, south of Long Island. This is a cold core system. These types of systems would become tropical if they were sitting off the down in off the North Carolina coast. We've seen that happen from time to time in the past number of years. They get out there, they sit there for a couple of days, and you wind up gradually transitioning over into a subtropical or even a tropical name system to come out of it. But that's not going to be the case this time around. And this upper low is going to uh, wait. The jet stream, if you notice, the main jet stream coming out of the southwest across the west coast and then running up into southeastern Canada is pushed pretty far to the north. So there's nothing to there was nothing there to kick this out, which was the initial problem. But now as we go forward, I can't seem to find my. There you go. The upper low is going to lift to the north and seem to have made my menu disappear. So let me try something. See if this works. Yep, that got rid of it. So that should bring the menu back. Oh no, maybe not. But at least I got the oh, there it is. Good. Now I can get rid of it. So your upper low is just going to rotate, a little more northwest overnight, and then move up into New England during the day tomorrow, and then move on its merry way into eastern Canada. And there is a northwest flow in the jet, but it's not a particularly cool one. And as we go through this week, we've got a fairly vigorous system at the end of the week. There's a short wave that comes through, late Tuesday, and then there's probably another little ripple on Wednesday. Then we wait for another short wave to drop on in later on Friday, and for the weekend, there's kind of this troughing there in the eastern part of the United States. So as you said, Joe, might have to deal with some showery and thundery weather next weekend. Also, the ridge. You notice that the ridge in the west initially builds up in the Central Plains and then moves into the Rockies into Utah, Wyoming, western Colorado. So you got a ridge in the western part of the United States. It does allow for a stronger shortwave to drop into eastern Canada in about 8 or 9 days, but it doesn't get down that far to the south. It's just sort of fleeting, lifts out, and then there's some sort of stronger trough as we move into the second week. Through uh, the second week of August, it looks like stronger troughing tries to get down into eastern Canada, and you see it there toward the end of the forecast period. But uh, it's not anything that we're going to, sound the trumpets yet, because we know how the GFS loves to do this, where it amplifies these weather systems. And then when we get closer, they're further north. They're not quite as deep. The trough doesn't get far enough south. this thing that it has way in the long range would be really kind of nice if that wound up verifying, is that looks like it would bring in a nice shot of cooler air and drier air, but I would I would not pin my hopes on this. And
No.
the other thing is, I've noticed the models over the last couple of days have been, you know, from run to run, it's got a tropical system developing, then it doesn't have it, then it has it, then one model has it, and another one doesn't have it. It seemed like today we went to the doesn't have it camp from what I looked at. Um, but there is something out there, and we'll put out the Hurricane Center does have a system here. We'll go to the 7-day forecast. They've got, there's right now there's barely just a batch of clouds with this, but they do have it moving west northwestward, and they're indicating a 40% chance in the next 7 days that this could become a tropical depression or a tropical storm. But I'd like to see something on the satellite other than some, you know, non nothing nothing to write home about type of clouds. In fact, I'll bring up that sat. Just give me a moment here, and we'll go to the Atlantic view.
A lot of different people on social media, especially on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, that have been beating the drum saying, okay, it looks like the tropics are going to wake up and looking at the Florida Peninsula or showing spaghetti plots showing the potential of some kind of a system impacting parts of the southeastern states. And this is all not right now or in the next day or two. This is like 10, 12 days down the
Uh,
road. But they really, get everybody all bent out of shape, if you will. Some spots maybe in the Gulf of Mexico. It's what can I say?
well, you got just from what I'm looking at here on the loop. One problem you have is that you do see that milky white Saharan dust that's come off. Okay, there is some there, probably not as extensive as what it was last week, but there's also an upper low right out here, so that's creating. Notice these clouds here in the eastern Atlantic are going from south to north, so you've got some shearing issues there. There is a strong looking wave that's off the African coast. It looks like there's another stronger wave behind it that'll be coming over in a couple of days. But this upper low's got to go away in order for any kind of tropical cyclone formation to happen. Meanwhile, the system that they're looking at is this batch of clouds here, which is just disorganized showers that are moving along to the west. And you'll notice in the Caribbean over Central America, there's this big blow up of thunderstorms today over Central America, and all these clouds that are just running away from southwest to northeast. Uh, so you've got shear conditions there as well. So this does not exactly look like the most favorable environment for tropical cyclone formation from what we're seeing at the moment.
And meantime, the folks over at the Climate Prediction Center are issuing a headline saying that now La Nina doesn't appear like it's going to get going until sometime between August and October. Now, if you remember, when we were coming into the summer season, oh my goodness, the combination of the exceptionally warm Atlantic basin and La Nina, which was going to form at any moment in time, and La Nina, certainly they would have said back in May and June, by this time, by the end of July, coming into midsummer, which will come about a week or so from now officially, that we would be fully into a La Nina pattern, and that who knows, we'd be by this time we might be working on our 10th or 12th or 14th tropical system. The way it may be making it sound, this was going to be a record-breaking all-time year for tropical systems, and yet here we are, end of July, and we're still waiting, or they're still waiting for a La Nina to fully develop. And now they're talking about, as I just said, it not developing until sometime between August, which is only a week from now, and maybe as late as October. So it just goes to show you that sometimes you really don't know. You really can't tell what's going to be happening in terms of the atmosphere. And that's probably why, with the fact that the La Nina hasn't really formed yet, that we haven't really seen very much. We've had exactly two tropical systems, the last one being Beryl, and Beryl was weeks ago. And now we're moving into August, and it's not likely that we're going to have another tropical storm or hurricane or system developed before the beginning of August on Thursday. So so far, it's been a relatively quiet tropical year. Now, of course, now that I've said that, once we get into August, traditionally, once we get past mid or late August, things really start to fire up and roll. But at the moment, at least, it's not the kind of tropical year that a lot of people were really alluding to just a month or two ago.
Yeah, but we saw last year there was very little, right with nothing during the month of August. Then it just exploded in September and October. So,
Correct.
so I mean
Correct.
that's probably going to happen again.
Correct.
I just, I just,
But what I'm saying is that we were being told by innumerable quote unquote experts that
well,
this
that's why you don't listen to those people.
this was going to be a record breaking, incredible year between again the very warm Atlantic Basin waters and the La Nina, and you got the impression that by this time, at the end of July, we'd be fully into a La Nina pattern, and these storms would be rolling one after
Right,
another.
and that obviously didn't happen.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. That's
yeah,
right.
absolutely, yeah. Um, and I'm just kind of looking here at the precipitable water of the subtropics and the tropics. I mean, it's not quite as dry as what we saw. Now, just let me get to where we're supposed to be today. This is Sunday. This is this evening, and you can see that it's a little bit more. It's moistened up a bit in that zone between 10 north and 20 north. And if you follow this patch of green that moves north of the islands along about Wednesday or Thursday, it doesn't. The models doesn't really develop anything until eventually it does try to get something going in the Gulf of Mexico around next a week from today. Long way off. And the other thing I would just point out, looking at this is when we look at the shear, all right, and let's just go to tonight. Let's go to what's going on at the moment. If you look at the African coast and you look at the winds off the African coast, I mean, there is wicked shear here. Winds, southerly shear going south to north. Uh, where this disturbance that they're looking at in the central Atlantic moving westward, it's in a lighter shear zone, but it's got to fight a trough that's to the northwest of that, and then we've got this deep trough in the central Caribbean that's going to be problematic unless that's going to be a problem for any type of tropical cyclone formation, and that this trough that's in the Atlantic that's east of Bermuda that runs down to just north of the northern Leeward Islands. Well, you know what? It's hanging around there. It's not going away. So we'll have to just see how this plays. But I'm not overly bullish about seeing anything during this upcoming work week.
Yep, I would agree. I would agree.
All right. So back to the U.S. of A. And we'll see what the GFS is doing here. And looking at tonight, you see what's happening with this ocean low that goes back northwestward to about Cape Cod. Some rain gets back into coastal New Jersey and Long Island, and to Connecticut and Rhode Island, and it still has it hanging around during at least during the morning hours tomorrow. Meanwhile, you've got building showers and storms in the Appalachians down to Georgia and North Florida. Uh, Again this week, it's just going to be a humid week. Might be some shower and thunderstorm chances late Tuesday, and then again on Wednesday. And as we move toward the end of the week, with maybe a stronger trough coming in next weekend, this is where we also have risk for showers and storms. Looks like Friday night, and then again Saturday night. Actually, Saturday almost looks like maybe a potential severe weather day in the eastern part of the United States. And that front goes by. You do see a bit of a high that comes down late next weekend, but the front doesn't get too far offshore. I don't know how much of that dry air is going to get in. So after that, you could just about draw anything you want on the map after next weekend, and it has half a chance of becoming true or not.
Yeah, when the thing is that the upper flow, these surges of dry air and possibly even cooler air, they all seem to shear off to the north of our area and never get a chance to bring down that nice, fresh, clean air mass into the northeastern states. Again, this didn't happen, let's say 40 or 50 years ago. 40 or 50 years ago, you used to have at least one shot of cool, dry air, and even in the month of July, but that doesn't seem to be happening. It seems
What's
now,
really sad now is when you say 40 or 50 years ago, when you used to say 40 or 50 years ago, it would be a time when you and I did not exist. Now, when you say 40 or 50 years ago, it would be a time when, we were young adults.
well, that's. I don't know about you. I sometimes I think of myself. I'm going to be celebrating a birthday on Friday, and for at least the last 10 or 15 years, every time I celebrate a birthday, I think back to my grandfather, and I think back to, and I remember, from way back when he was my age, and saying to myself, and what year he was, and what he was doing at that time, and now here I am, all these years later, at that same age, and it's a little disconcerting. It's a little frightening even.
But we're doing things at our age that those generations didn't do. People, I mean, frankly, they didn't seem to live as long. And I think there's a lot of truth to the fact that um, maybe some of it is the perception, a child's perception. Okay, maybe some of it is,
Now,
but
Rich,
I think people that are 60 and 70-year olds today don't look quite as old as people who were 60 and 70 years old when we were
oh,
kids.
I agree.
You
I
know,
absolutely
they
agree.
don't.
In fact, the perception was that when you got up to about where we are now, that we were elderly, and I'll give you proof of that. Yes, Dennis, she is. I told her that Dennis tomorrow is leaving for Vermont for the annual Stellafane convention, and Renata and I will be joining him and his lovely wife Kim on Friday. And Dennis says, "Is Renata bringing a birthday cake for you to Stellafane?" She is, but I told her, I said, "I don't know what you're going to do, because if she makes the cake and she puts the frosting on it, it's going to be so humid that frosting is going to be melting off the cake." She said, "We'll just put it in the refrigerator when we get to the hotel." But Joe, getting back to what you were saying, there's an episode of The Honeymooners where Ralph and Alice get a knock at the front door, and they open it up, and there's this elderly couple.
Right,
And the gentleman says, "I hope you don't mind us intruding." And his wife says, "But we used to live here. We 40 years ago when we first got married." So in other words, this couple had been married 40 years, and yet they were portrayed as two almost over the hill people.
right.
Uh,
Because if you
if,
think about it, especially in those days, people got married a lot younger. So if it was 40 years, which means that if they got married, let's just say at the age of 20, which was not unusual. Okay.
but
So
but you
you're
see
supposed to
what
look at these
I'm
people
trying
and
to
think
say.
that they're 60 years old, and you're right. They look like they were in their 80s or even beyond their 80s.
Exactly. And the point I'm trying to make is that Renata and I are going to be married 40 years on September 1st. And I look at that episode when it comes up every so often, and I say, is that what we're supposed to look like? Or is that, we have a couple that's married 40 years? Is that what no, that was the perception, I guess, back in the 1950s. And maybe somebody is right. Somebody told me recently, they said, look at it this way: 70 is the new 50.
Yeah, that's true. Well,
And
look, since you and I are attached to the at the hip in so many ways, you just have to worry that I don't go before you do.
yeah,
Because if I go first, if I wind up going first,
you
that
go first.
mean
I'm going to,
right, but you'll be able to plan. You'll be able to plan. You'll know. Okay, Joe's gone. How much time do I really have left here? Oh, now he's gone. What are
if,
you what are you getting?
if you go, Joe, and we certainly don't want you to go,
Right.
but if you do go, I'm going to tell Renata and remind her here where this is.
Ah,
what, what draw? You know, I said, all right, you better get ready because Shafi's gone, and I'm probably going to be not too far behind.
All right. Um, also, would be well. I'll wait for him to get back so you can hear me. Um, I said also it'll be very important for you to pay close attention to how I go. Is that
Yeah.
because we've done that a few times as well, especially
Oh
when it comes to dental work.
God.
All right. Anyway, let's do Briller Jeopardy, shall we?
Yeah,
While we're
sure.
still breathing. I think you have it, right?
I do.
Or do I? I
I'll check.
forgot. I forgot who did it last.
Let me check. Um, 3:34 p.m. So I guess he sent this.
Yeah, you have it because the last one we did, we had the Atlanta, Boston, Buffalo, Austin, Chicago. That was
Okay,
last week.
so Umbrella Jeopardy average high temperatures in July in selected cities, starting with the Queen. Do you know what the Queen City is, by the way?
Isn't it Montreal?
No, it's Cincinnati.
Oh, Cincinnati. That's right. Yeah, Cincinnati.
Yes.
Cincinnati. There ain't another thing clean to Cincinnati.
Cincinnati.
Other than Aunt Sally's pecan pralines. Um, so what are we doing? The average what
Average high in July
in Cincinnati?
for Cincinnati.
I'll say 87.
Joe, I almost had to ring the bell for you.
Well, Rich Rothmansky and Carol DeCara also said 87, but Chuck Cardillo said no, 86.
Well, Chuck Cardillo, I'm going to ring the bell for you then. Ding! There you go. Congratulations, Chuck.
All right.
All
What's
right.
next? What's
How,
next?
how about Big D, Dallas, Texas?
We're doing July, you said, right?
Yes. Yes.
I'll say 94.
Um, Not hot enough, believe it or not.
All right. Okay. Well, Rich Rothmansky says 96.
Rich Rosman,
And
you're in snake country with that.
all right, so it's either 95 or 97. Craig Carlberg said 95, and so did Frank Scalera.
Still not hot enough. So that only
So that leaves, let me guess, Joe, 97.
97 is correct. By the way, I just Googled Bent Fork, Tennessee, just to see if there was a place in Tennessee named Bent Fork.
Mm-hmm.
Believe it or not,
There is.
there is not a Bent Fork, Tennessee, but there is East Fork Bent Creek. I wonder if the writers
Must have
at
looked at it and said, okay, we could take the bent and the fork and call it bent fork.
and actually people also ask, what is the population of Bent Fork, Tennessee? The gang and cousin Ernie sing Old MacDonald had a farm to cover up the noise of filing Lucy out of the jail cell. In the version the gang sings, Old MacDonald had a pig, a duck, and a saw on the farm. The population of Bent Fork is a mere, tell me, Joe, what's the population?
Well, there's the song there. If you watch the whole uncut episode, there's a bent fork sign at the beginning, but I
Yeah,
don't remember, was it like a 100?
54.
54. Okay.
There you go. Here's one. Dallas. Excuse me. We already did Dallas. Denver. Another D
I hate
city.
when we go to those states. I can't figure it out. Uh, for Denver, I'll say 92.
A little bit too hot, believe it or not.
Okay, yeah, it's Denver's always tough. Northern Grace says 85.
Nope.
Maggie P said 88. Lou Arizio said 88. Frank Scalera 89.
Carol DeChera, 89.
89.
That's close. That's
Okay,
snake.
so
Ballarat is
so
over the
so
country.
is it 90?
It's 90.
Hmm.
Believe it or not, if you go to Denver, Colorado, the mile high city, their high temperature, the average high in the Rockies, 90 degrees in July.
Yeah, but it's a dry heat.
And how about Honolulu? Honolulu.
I'll say 88.
Oh, Joe, right on the nose. Oh my God. There you go. 88, right on the nose, believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen. How about Houston or Houston?
I'll say 94.
Another snake uh, country vicinity, Joe.
All right. 94. Frank Scalera says 93.
Frank
William,
Scalera.
oh, he got it?
Yep. And we have one more bonus city tonight, and that is Caribou, Maine.
It's always Caribou. Uh, um, I don't know. What, 80?
No, not that high.
Okay. Vincent Croce says 74.
Oh, that's that's so close. And Christinepedia said the same thing, 74.
And Miss Spallright says 75.
And Miss Ballerite is correct. 75 degrees in Caribou, average high temperature in July. And believe me, if that be the case, next summer, I'm going to Caribou.
Yes, I wouldn't blame you. Or you could come down here to North Georgia and
North
sit
Georgia?
and sit in the mountains.
Yeah.
I mean, we've had a dozen days this summer where we've gotten over 90 here at my house, which is more than the prior 3 summers combined. But no matter. We've had a couple of coolish nights here too, which is nice. I also had a coyote last night.
Oh,
I mean, I didn't. My neighbor did. Uh, uh, so, and it was not a small coyote either. Uh, it was at 11 o'clock at night. I actually went out last night. I didn't get home till 10. So I missed the coyote by about an hour, which I'm very happy about.
I told you off air several hours ago that yesterday I had spent several hours, mowing the lawn and dumping old twigs and tree branches into the woods. I'm coming out and I see Renata frantically at the end of the driveway waving to me, and in one hand, in one hand she had our dog Sweeney's leash, and at the end of the leash there was his collar, and he had managed to slip out of his collar. Actually, it's not a collar; it's a harness. For God's sake, this dog is like Houdini sometimes. And so into the car we had to go, and we had to traipse across, I think, half of Putnam Valley. And finally, after about 20 minutes, we found at the end of the street. I mean, all the way down the roadway, she caught sight of what looked to be a dog in the middle of the street, and she said, "That's him! That's him!" And on a street where maybe the speed limit is 20 miles an hour at most, I must have floored the car to like 70 just to get all the way down to where he was. And finally, when we did get there, he was like wagging his tail. A woman came out of her house saying, "Oh, what a cute little dog." And that's when Renata jumped out of the car and grabbed him. And I
Well,
tell the dog doesn't see. Now, on the screen, you could see there's a coyote. And
yeah.
we have him here in Putnam Valley. And I tell Sweeney, I said, it's not what you think. You're having fun out in the woods. You're playing, you're frolicking, you're thinking, there are things out there that will have you for lunch. And that is one of those things right there. And I wouldn't be surprised if his name was Wiley.
Yeah, well, I mean, look at that thing. That's not a small coyote,
No, it's not.
you know? So that's at my neighbor's property. Which is, not next door. It's like just a little bit of ways away, but close enough. And I've noticed the last couple of days that my dog has been barking at various times when it seems like there's been nothing outside to bark at. And he's been good in the past about picking up on things. And then I find out usually the next day. I got one more picture. This was last week. Same neighbor with a bear. So that's what that looks like,
I.
So
What is he?
uh,
What is he smiling at?
that don't look like a smile to me.
You and I are from the area around Throgs Neck. In our younger days, Frank Scalera says, believe it or not, Pelham Bay Park in Throgs Neck is starting to have a lot of coyote sightings
Oh
along.
yeah, and deer. They have a lot of deer too.
Oh, I'd love to see. Would you love to see a deer racing down East Tremont Avenue?
Well, it's not impossible. Over the years on Long Island, the number of deer just exploded,
Yeah.
and they basically migrated westward. So you'd see them on main roads. I mean, it wasn't. It's become a much more of a common sight than what it used to be. Oh well, hopefully they're outside and they don't bother me. Okay, and I guess we could wrap it up. The JoJo Weather Show podcast. Brought to you by Tempest by Weatherflow. The revolutionary Tempest weather system is yours for the asking, and get one and join the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet. The link is on the descriptor to this podcast. Use that coupon code.
Summer 2024,
If you do, you will get,
10% off. And we
and
want to thank everybody who was on tonight. We only have 64 watching right now. We started 50 minutes ago, and yet we have 64 likes. So thank you, every one
yeah,
of you.
that works for me. So we'll be back tomorrow night at 7:35 p.m. By the way, check out the community section on YouTube because I've been posting links to the show and links to some of my written forecast discussions that I put up every day. So uh, when a new fresh video, plus I usually do two videos a day, but today I only did one, and I posted links in there in the community section. Plus, you can check in the library for weather in a minute, and during the week I'll be putting up weather in 5. Okay, my volume suddenly went low. Sorry about that. I guess I'm not talking loud enough. Okay. Anyway, everybody have a great rest of your night, and we will see you tomorrow night at 7:35 p.m. Night night.
Good night, folks.